podcast.
Well, he's one of the most promising coaches in the AFL, coming off a hugely impressive first season in the job, and at just 39 years of age, he's one of the youngest in the most difficult of capers. A former number 2 draft pick with the Fremantle Dockers, he now coaches the club that he played 139 games for and loves. So it's the stuff of dreams, and while the second phase, the coaching phase, is still in a very early stage, Justin Longmuir is making that a reality, and I'm delighted to say that he's with me now. Justin, thanks so much for doing so, and great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Garby, and thanks for that kind introduction. Very nice.
It's going along very well, and I'm looking forward to talking about your first season in coaching and so many other aspects to your sporting journey so far. But you've just finished that first season in charge. You've gone on a bit of a break and a bit of a holiday to Garby in WA, which, being a WA boy, I know is a beautiful place. How badly needed was that after your first season in the most engrossing and consuming of jobs?
I'm not sure whether it was badly needed for my own good. I think it was badly needed to reconnect with the family and reintroduce myself. We were obviously away for a lot of the year, and it was really difficult on the loved ones who had to stay back home, especially my wife with 2 kids at 2 different schools and doing all the running around. And I know a lot of people within the footy club were in the same boat. So to get a little bit of time off and reconnect with the families is really important.
Can you switch off on a holiday like that? Do you put the phone away, put the email away, and fully immerse yourself with the family, or is being an AFL coach just far too difficult of a job to actually switch off 100% even for a week?
I can do it. I can do it for short periods of time, but whether I put my phone away or not, I still have a lot of stuff thrashing through my head, and constantly thinking about the machinations of a lot of different things, whether it's trade, draft, how we're going to play next year, what changes we need to make, what roles and responsibilities do our coaches have, what's training going to look like. And a weird one this year is, how we're going to get our players back together. We've got players stuck in Adelaide at the moment, players in all areas of the country. So how are we going to facilitate them getting back on time? And, probably not overly worried about that aspect pre-Christmas, but definitely worried about it post-Christmas when we need to hit the ground running and get our squad together as quickly as can. So it is quite difficult. I have learnt to be better at putting my phone away and being a little bit more present around my kids and wife in particular, but I find it hard to escape it. That's on the flip side. I love it. So I just need to make sure my priorities are right at any given time, because I can get really consumed in work. I'm
sure that's the case. I'm keen to go through your coaching journey and some of your playing days as well, and your background story. But growing up in WA, I'm an Eagles fan, but I watched the Dockers very closely as a sports lover in Perth, and I watched you very closely as a result. I'll be honest, you never struck me as a player who would end up being a coach, and that might not be the accurate perception, but you seem to me as someone who was quite relaxed, obviously with a desperate desire to win, but not someone who had that intensity about them that would then lead to them being a coach. What do you make of that perception, and whether it was an accurate one or not?
It was accurate, especially my early days. As a kid growing up until I was 16, I wanted to go back on the family farm, and I was content with doing that. And in some sense, footy found me, or I found footy at a late, and wanted to be a professional footballer at a really late stage in my life, really. I wasn't a kid who grew up with a footy in his hand, was desperate to be an AFL player. Now, in some respect, I was just good at it, and that was through probably having an older brother, and following my dad, who played a lot of country football. And it's weird because footy in the country is really social, and it brings the community together. So we live 45 k's North Dakota on a farm. The only time we really went to town was for footy, for whether it was training or games on the weekend. So it brought the community together. So so footy in some sense found me, and once I started playing, I knew that, and met my wife, who's no way we're going to move back to the country. She's a city girl through and through. So I had to find something else. And little did I know at the time, but all the experiences I went through as a player, good and bad, helped give me some really good experiences to be a coach. And once I retired, I found coaching and fell in love with it. And have loved it ever since I started it. Playing footy at a professional level, but also playing sport at any level. You just love the connection and and what being part of a team brings to your life. And being a professional sportsman, so going and hanging out with your best mates every day and training as a group and the fun the fun and enjoyment that brings. I missed when I retired, so I got back into footy and got back into coaching and have loved it ever since. And I've had a real drive to be the best coach I can be. Since day one, I took up coaching because I knew once I took up coaching that I was only going to give the players that I worked with the best opportunity if I was the best I could be. So I really felt that responsibility to them, and it's driven me ever since.
And it started very well, and I can't wait to get into some more details on that. I approached you for this interview through Twitter. You followed me, and looking at your Twitter page, it's quite interesting that an AFL coach has a picture of him with the English Premier League trophy and then a picture of Wembley as his background. So you've obviously got a bit of a passion for football, and I dare say that's where you followed me from when I was working on the Premier League. How deep was the interest in that sporting competition and the world game, I guess? Yeah,
I enjoy all other sports, to be honest. I've got Foxtel at home, and I only ever watch sport on it. I've never watched any other channel, and it's the whole reason I've got it, because I love watching sport from any other area of the world. And I think that came about. The Premier League stuff came about when I was playing. I loved watching the Premier League and followed Man U and knew all their players and positions. And I was lucky enough to start following Man U on the back of Beckham, Scholes, Giggs, really successful era. Sir Alex Ferguson coaching them, and that's probably what got me into it more than me choosing them. They chose me in a way because they were so successful. So I love following them, and ever since I was taken up coaching, I've tried to learn from other areas of sport, because as much as the strategy side of our game is pretty select to AFL, it's the actual skill of coaching is you can learn from any other sport. And a lot of different areas. So those photos came about on the back of an AFL Coach Association trip I did with a number of AFL coaches. Got to visit some Premier League sides and go to some games and managed to catch a few conferences over there as well, which that photo actually comes from one of the conferences we attended. So I think at the end of every year, as an assistant coach in particular, I tried to do either a coaching course overseas or a tour overseas, or visit some people who are specialists in coaching and could help my coaching. I think it's an opportunity you don't get in season, is to really spend some time on your coaching. Your coaching. So I try to take up those opportunities as much as I could.
Is it true that you bumped into Mauricio Pochettino, the former Tottenham manager, during your travels, and he's actually aware of, believe it or not, a guy from Argentina who coaches in Europe, he's aware of Aussie rules footy as well? Yeah,
I did. We were lucky enough to do a tour through the Tottenham Hotspur's new facility, which I think they'd just spent £70 million, and it was brand new when we went there. We were lucky enough to have a connection through one of their physios, who I think is still there. I think he's either an Aussie or a New Zealander. And he's head of their medical. So we're lucky enough to get a tour with him, and we bumped into Pochettino in the gym, and he asked where we're from and talked about Aussie rules, and he was fascinated with the amount of distance our players covered and the amount of hits they took. I remember telling him that Andrew Gaff was at West Coast at the time, and Andrew Gaff can run 16, 17 kilometres in a game, and he was shocked by how far we run and how much they get hit, and the physical demands on our game. He knew about our sport, and was really interested, and he's a top line coach, so it was an honour to meet him.
He's top class, and I'm sure he'll land at a big club soon. One of the things about Premier League management that's so fascinating is how they go about, and any top level football management is how they try and manage the egos of guys who earn ridiculous money, especially young players, like kids who haven't played for the first team who are earning like 50,000 Australian dollars a week. It's crazy. How do you think as a coach you would go managing that sort of environment, and how big of a challenge do you think it would be, and is it a challenge for you in the AFL environment?
Yeah, absolutely. It is still a challenge. We've got a lot of different personalities that we have to deal with. I think, it's hard for individuals to really stand out and win games in AFL, given there's 18 on the field. So, and I think the culture in Australia is been brought up, I suppose, to be a bit more team orientated, and our culture sort of a bit of tall poppy syndrome, so it beats people down a little bit. So I think that's made it a little bit easier to coach here. But I think it just comes back to setting really strong team standards and making sure that everyone, pulls in the line with those team standards. And I'm a strong believer that the players have got to come up with their own standards and keep each other accountable to those standards. And I think that our playing group and at administration have done a really good job of that this year. And I think, we've seen there's been some change at our footy club in player personnel, and, some of that is off the back of, really strong team standards that we're trying to uphold at Freo.
One of the players, and I'm going to use a Premier League comparison when talking about one of the young Freo players, I've got just an honest man crush on Caleb Sarong. I think he is just a wonderful young player. I drafted him into my fantasy team without knowing what he looked like or how he played, but I knew he was an early draft pick and he was likely to play for you this year. So then I watched him closely, and to put the Premier League comparison in play, I think I tweeted this year that he reminds me of a Xabi Alonso, and that he'll be a Xabi Alonso of the AFL, who was a wonderful midfielder for Liverpool and Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and the Spanish team. And when he came to Liverpool, Xabi Alonso, Steven Gerrard and Jamie Carragher said the way he passes the ball had a different sound to it. Like whether he was passing 5 metres or 30 metres, it had like a different fizz to it, almost like a golfer who has got a different strike to the way he hits the ball. I sort of see that in Caleb Sarong from afar, even if it's a 2-metre handball or a 40-metre kick, it's got like a different sound and fizz to it. He's a hugely impressive young player, obviously the rising star. As a coach, how exciting is this kid to work with, and is that an accurate portrayal of what he's capable of?
Yeah, it is. And he is an impressive young man. I remember really early in pre-season, he came to the coaches and said, don't be scared to put me on Fifey. He might beat me now, but I want to learn from him. I want to know what makes him so good. So if we do match him, can you put me against him? And it's like, well, yeah, no worries. It's such a good trait to have, to be putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and trying to grow from them. And he's got this great mix of confidence in his own ability and his want to take on a big challenge, but also the humility of knowing that he's not where he wants to be, and he's working every day to be his best self. He's a beauty. I think there's we had actually a lot of wet games this year, wet weather footy. And I remember the game against Geelong, and he was so clean in everything he did. He was playing on one of the best players in the competition in Dangerfield, but also he was so clean. And that just shows how much work he puts in during the week. He's always touching the footies. He's always looking for every avenue he can to be better. That's just a great attribute to have in a young player. So that's going to hold him in good stead for the future.
Someone like him, then, do you have to keep him in check and make sure he doesn't get ahead of himself, or are you just so confident that he's so sound mentally that you just sort of let him be? Everyone's different.
and some players are going to get ahead of themselves and read their own press and drop their work rate, and some players are just going to strive so hard for it that they work too hard. And he's probably in the second bucket. I'm more worried about him making sure he has a break, making sure he trains with real purpose rather than, and it's more with him, it's more about quality over quantity. I don't want him doing too much and burning himself out. It's more about just making sure he does everything with real purpose and quality over this period of time in particular. I've got no issues with him. Him and his work rate. He's gonna do everything he can to be the best version of himself he can be. And to be honest, that's a characteristic that shines through with so many of our young players, that they just got this burning desire to be their best self. And really, it's easy job as a coach is just to make sure we can guide them in the right directions and set up a program where they've got everything they need to assist that burning desire.
Fantastic. I've used a few, football analogies with Aussie rules here. You mentioned the town you grew up in, Coorda, which is 236 kilometres out of Perth, Justin, a 3-hour drive, and it has a population of 260 people. I can't imagine there's too much of an interest in the world game in the town of Coorda.
No, we didn't play soccer. We didn't play soccer as a kid. Soccer balls weren't floating around. It was cricket in the summer and footy in the winter. The girls, or the women, played hockey, and basketball was a midweek game. So that was probably about the extent of it. I say I'm from Coorda, but I'm actually from a small country town called Gabon. Went to school at Gabon. When I was at school in Gabon, there was only 16 kids at the school. So trying to scratch around for a game of cricket or a game of footy at lunchtime or recess was quite a difficult task. Like I said before, I loved growing up in the country. I loved farming. Loved helping Dad on the farm before and after school. And looking back on it, that gave me a lot of the things that have made me a good coach as well. I feel like I've got a good grounding in work ethic. I'm a good problem solver on the back of having to problem solve on the farm at an early age. As a kid, I would pull apart motors on the farm and put them back together just to see if I could do it and what they were about. And that's what I'm trying to do now with the game plan, and a lot of things that I'm good at now I was good at back then, and got a good grounding in a lot of areas because of my interests on the farm and growing up in isolation, but also having a lot of responsibility as a kid. I remember driving heavy machinery at 13 or younger. I was driving utes around the farm at probably younger than that. And my son's 13 now, and I can imagine him driving a tractor or a header. So I had a lot of responsibility as a kid and a great interest in being a farmer.
I imagine your parents as well had to sacrifice so much to get you from, the country towns 3 hours out of Perth back to Perth when you had to get there for games or trials and things like that. How much, respect do you have for them, and how strong is your perception of sacrifice, if you like, to make it to the top and to give the people around you what they need off the back of that?
Yeah, it's massive. And then, anyone who grew up or is growing up in the country now would understand the sacrifices that parents make to. I think I think my wife has a lot to do after school, running our kids around to school sports. But my parents, for us to come to the city, we had to drive 3 hours each way. Not that we'd do that a lot as kids, but I mean a lot of our sports, and especially if we wanted to extend ourselves, were done in other towns. So sometimes it'd be an hour, sometimes it'd be 2 hours each way for some sport. So my parents would do that, and they would never whinge, and they just did it because they first and foremost they knew we had a real passion for it and we loved doing it. So they did everything they could to support us wherever they could. So and we've got a lot of players on our list who are country kids and have had similar upbringings to I had. It just helps you to relate, I guess, and helps you understand what they went through as kids. And it's interesting because everyone's had a different upbringing. Everyone's got a journey and different story to tell. And as a coach, you've got to try and understand and build relationships and understand what makes people tick, and that only comes about by spending time with each other. So it's something I've tried to do, something I can get a lot better at, and something I need to really maintain.
I imagine the relationship you have with your brother is pretty important when you have that sort of upbringing. Your brother Troy played for Fremantle, Carlton and Melbourne. So, I mean, that kind of connection that you have with him, it must have been so important in your progression as a human as well. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, we were really different growing up. I was always out on the farm, always driving headers and tractors, utes. Whereas he loved sport, so he was always had a footy in his hand. Always, every pair of trees he'd use as a set of goals and try and kick goals. And he'd always be on to me about having a kick or playing cricket or playing basketball. And every afternoon we'd play a game of basketball or where the rules would change, or play footy or cricket. Yeah, we only had each other. So he would always be at me trying to have a game of sport with him. He wasn't overly interested in the farm, and he wasn't really that keen to drive tractors and headers, and he'd do stuff around the farm, but wasn't really interested in the machinery. He was definitely more interested in sport than me. But as I was 2 years younger than Troy, so having to fight out of my weight division a lot really helped me, I reckon, become the player I was. And Dad would quite often come home early from work at about 5:30 and kick the ball up to us, and we'd play one-on-one until often I would crack the shits and go inside because Troy was beating me up. That was good grounding for me. Little did I know at the time, but it was really helpful. I don't think there is a lot of studies and a lot of good footballers or good sports people out there have had that sort of grounding. So, and I mean, I probably wouldn't have found footy if it wasn't for Troy, because when he led the way, he got drafted the year before I did, and I think West Perth invited me down on the back of him getting drafted. Invited me down to the Colts when I was playing year 12 at Cundernag, when I was at Cundernag. So I drove down every weekend and played at West Perth Colts, and that got me drafted. And I don't think that would have happened without Troy sort of paving the way and showing me that you could do it. So I'll be forever grateful for the lessons he taught me as a young fellow, but also the path he paved towards AFL.
Wonderful. And now you're an AFL coach, despite being the less sport obsessed kid growing up, and you've gone through West Coast and Collingwood before landing the senior coaching role at Fremantle, and those two clubs obviously played in the grand final of 2018. What's it like, Justin, being in an AFL coaching box during a grand final that's decided by less than a goal? Yeah,
it was, and looking back on it, it was a great experience. Grand finals are phenomenal events to be a part of. Not always enjoyable. Clearly, the two grand finals I've been involved in as an assistant coach, we lost both. They were great experiences, and I think you learn a lot from coaching at a club after a losing grand final. And I think, in particular, the losing grand final at Collingwood, we handled pretty well, and it's a bit of a template that I'd use if I was in that situation again, and it's given me great experiences. Even though I wasn't at West Coast at the time, I still had had a lot of friends there. I spent 7 years at West Coast, so I had some really strong relationships, and to see a lot of those players in particular bounce back from the disappointment of 2015 was really good. And guys like Mark Lacroix and Josh Kennedy, who I'm still really close to now, it was good to see them get the ultimate success, because I know how much work they've put in to their careers, and especially Mark Lacroix to go out having won a grand final was I couldn't think of a better way to exit the game, and it was well deserved.
A West Perth boy as well. What's it like from a decision making point of view in a grand final that is that tense? I mean, is it almost one that you sit there with a different level of anxiety over the calls that you're making, and what's it like in the box in terms of having to communicate with the senior coach? Is the tension just on another level?
Yeah, it is. And there were some big calls to make. I suppose in that grand final, I mean, Josh Kennedy had a good game, and that matchup was causing us probably a few headaches at the time. As the game unfolds, it's sort of what can you do from the coach's box? Not a lot. It's just making sure you've got the right people on the ground, I suppose, that come the end of the game, and you've just got to trust the players as the game unfolded. Unfortunately, we're on the wrong side of that. I still. Big part of my coaching philosophy is that the work's done during the week. You can't change the game much on game day. It's about letting the players go out there and execute the game plan. And I think you can change it. You can change certain things, and you need to make sure that you're flexible in your thinking, and you give the players the tools they need. But largely, they'll work it out themselves.
The transition from an assistant then to a senior coach, I can imagine, is monumental. Can you put into words the main aspects of that, why it's such a big jump, and just how different and consuming it is?
Well, it's the consuming part of it, which makes it so much different. I mean, as an assistant coach, like, for instance, in my last couple of years at Collingwood, I was in charge of the back line. So I had a group of 15 players that I was looking after, and I was in charge of team defence. So they're your two little pots that you look after, and that's where you spend all your time. And you might have some opinions on different aspects of the footy club and different aspects of the way we play and that, but largely you've got two areas that you sort of nail down, and you make sure that you give the senior coach the best service you can in those two areas. Whereas as a senior coach, you've got so many different aspects you need to be across, whether it's recruiting and list management and the coach. You're in charge of managing the coaches and the game, the whole game plan. Everyone wants a little bit of your time, so you just got to make sure that you're really clear on your priorities. And my first pre-season, the priorities were mainly around building relationships with our coaches and players. So you got to make sure that when you say that, you prioritise enough time to be able to implement that. So I think it's all consuming the job. You just got to make sure that you're prioritising the right things, and you're really setting up a framework so that you can trust the people around you to do their jobs. So you got to make sure you give them enough clarity and enough structure so that they can really get to work and do their jobs.
And the main thing, of course, is trying to instill belief in a playing group that had low expectations on it going into the season, but despite not making the finals, certainly surpassed those. You stepped into the role and the mantra was anything is possible. It's one thing saying that, Justin, to a playing group, but how do you then get players to believe it? How do you set about getting it into their mindset so they actually step out on the field against an opponent that is expected to beat them and actually believe that?
Yeah, well, I suppose that tagline is, just about taking away any ceiling and believing that if we play our best footy, we can beat anyone. And, the season didn't start the way we wanted it to, but there was enough there in those first 4 games in particular to show our playing group that our best footy is good enough. And, it was only really small lapses in games that were hurting us, and that was probably coming off the back of the players not really knowing and embedding their roles, and under pressure, sometimes players would lose structure within their role, and that would hurt us on the scoreboard. And I think internally we just wanted to improve week in, week out, and I think we were doing that. And as coaches, it was really easy to be able to show the players that improvement. And largely the whole year really was built on the back of rewarding the behaviours we want to see, whether that was on the field or off the field, and create a positive environment where they could see that the improvement was there and our best footy was good enough. So I think everyone would say that we became a lot more consistent as the year unfolded. There's certainly games where we should have won, and I mean I still look back at round one against Essendon, poor start, but came home with a wet sail and could have won that if the game had gone a little bit longer. The Gold Coast game was a game that we should have won or could have won. And then the Carlton game was one that stands out that got beaten by a kick after the siren. So there are some missed opportunities there, but we've got to make sure that we improve over pre-season so that we continue to give ourselves opportunities in every game, but we're able to finish off those tight ones.
That Carlton game was so interesting because you seem to get a couple of rough calls late, yet you in your press conference, unlike so many other coaches across the world in sport, didn't have a crack. You were pretty measured. Is that a conscious decision you make before the press conference? I'm not going to have a crack at anyone for whatever reason, or is that just you and you don't focus on those things? How do you process that in your mind?
Yeah, it's a lot of different things. Personally, I never blame anyone apart from us apart from our performance for a loss. I mean, in life you can get so caught up in trying to control things you can't control. So I always try and bring it back to us. I wanted our players to know that there were things within that game that we could have controlled better to execute at the end. And there's so many things that we could have executed better. And that was an interesting week for a first-time senior coach in that situation as well, because quite often I think you can hang on to those sorts of games and let it affect the next week because you don't prepare well and your focus is in the rearview mirror rather than focusing on what's ahead. So we were very, really conscious as the coaching group to review it like any other game and move on really quickly. And I think we played a really good game against Sydney the next week and showed that as a group we handled the week and the disappointment really well and were able to move on.
You say you can't control it, but it's funny. Some coaches, for example, in soccer, they actually say things in the press to then influence the referee's decision-making the next time they play them. They think if we say something, it's going to subconsciously get in the referee's mind and they may give us a call or two. And I dare say some AFL coaches have done the same. I'm going to attack them in the press, so maybe subconsciously they have some sympathy. I mean, are you wary of that, maybe trying to manage it in that way? And do you think you might change as time goes on in this caper?
Yeah, I hope I don't change. I also thought I'd be nice and measured and calm in the coach's box, which hasn't turned out to be as true as I thought. My wife actually is a bit shocked by some of my carry-on in the coach's box. She thought I'd be boring, but I've actually shown a little bit of emotion. I've always thought that there's right and wrong ways to do things, and we've got access to the coaches department, the umpires, coaches, if we want, and I feel like. There's right ways to go about disputing umpire decisions, or the way the umpires umpire on the weekend is the right way to go about it, and that's behind the scenes. Because it's really important that I think that our members know that we're doing everything we can for the footy club, and we're protecting our players as well. So there is avenues that the AFL have set up for coaches to have conversations with the umpiring department. So we do that. I don't think playing that out in public is the right way of going about it. And I'd hope that the umpires are professional enough to realise that, and professional enough to be neutral in any given situation. And I strongly believe they are, to be honest. So I don't have any thought of trying to manipulate the umpires through the media. I don't think. I think they're more professional than that, and I give them a lot more credit than that.
Well said. The win after a game, the satisfaction of that as a player compared to being a coach. How do you weigh it up? It's. I'll probably get more enjoyment now, to be honest.
It's interesting as a player. Like everyone thinks being a professional sports person's this great life, but it's really only one situation you can be happy with as a player, and that's when you play well and your team wins. Because sometimes you play well and you lose, and sometimes you win and you don't play well. So it's hard to enjoy those moments. So you really only get great satisfaction as a professional sports person when you play well and the team wins. So it is quite difficult, and you'd be mindful of the fact that doesn't happen. Those two things don't coincide all that often. So one thing we've tried to do this year, and especially in a difficult season it is, whether we win or lose, we try and review the game on its merits. Because sometimes, for instance, we won our first game this year against Adelaide, and I thought we'd played better footy in 3 of the games we lost before than what we did in the win. So we try and be really consistent and measured in the way we review games. But we're also really conscious to make sure our players enjoy the moment after a win. Sometimes as a coach you want them to move on to the next week straight away, but I'm really conscious that there isn't a lot of enjoyment and a lot of time to sit back and reflect when you're a player and enjoy those moments. So quite often post games, sometimes even when we lost, we'd sit around in the players' locker room and have a beer together and enjoy it and enjoy the work we'd put in and look at each other and have a chat and enjoy the journey. I mean, sometimes you get on the roller coaster or the treadmill of AFL footy and you're constantly moving ahead. Sometimes you just need to sit still and enjoy each other's company and reflect on the hard work. So we tried to do that a lot this year.
No doubt. And the journey, obviously, the ultimate goal is to win a premiership. You've got, a generational player in Nat Fyfe, who I'm sure you'd like to all deliver that for and has that goal in his mind before he ends. Do you start talking about that yet with the playing group? That is our goal, to win a premiership, or do you not even mention that yet because you're still in your infancy as a group?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Our goal is to have a sustained successful period, and if we can do that and win a lot of games in a lot of different consecutive years, well then the premierships hopefully will come, or we'll give ourselves an opportunity to win premierships. I think at any sporting organisation, everyone's got those goals. But to be frank, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about goals. I think goals are great to give you direction and let you know why you're here, but we try and spend a lot more time on the process, spend a lot more time on getting every day right, making sure that our players have an attitude where they rock up to work and try and get better every day, and just spend a lot of time on the building blocks that will allow us to get there rather than the end or the outcome. I think if you've got to focus on the outcome, you can lose focus on the process. So I know it's boring and it's cliched, but we just try and get our players to live in the moment and try and get the most out of every moment, because if they can get that right, well then the end will look after itself, and where we want to get to as a team we'll get to. But yeah, I'm mindful that we're in a hurry as a footy club, and I'm mindful of the lack of success of this footy club, and large burden that I carry is that I want our members to be really proud, and I want our members to enjoy some success, because I know that we've got a really passionate supporter group that have stuck with us a long time, and I really want to reward them for all their hard work and all their passion and dedication to our club. So but I've just got to check myself when I start thinking like that, and make sure that I set up a program so our players can get better every day.
I'm sure they're aware of that, but at the same time, really excited about where this group is going. One of the challenges you did have this season, though, of course, was Jesse Hogan, a big-name recruit who had come in, who's now been traded to GWS. His off-field issues have been well documented. How difficult a situation was that to manage Justin, and then a decision to come to move him on to another club?
Yeah, of course it's difficult. And when we're dealing with people and what's best for every individual on our list. And it was, in the end, it was a mutual decision. And Jesse thought it was the best thing for him as well to get away from Perth and get away to a team that would give him a little bit more, anonymity. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
And allow him to do things outside of football where he wasn't in the spotlight all the time. And I think that's the best decision that Jesse could have made. I think as a footy club, we tried to support him and gave him as much support as we could. And it didn't work out, but I'm really confident that Jesse can get himself right and get his focus back on his footy and dedicate himself to footy. He'll have a really successful finish to his career. So I do wish him all the best. And I'm disappointed it didn't work out at Freo and didn't work out in Perth for him. But on the same hand, I care for Jesse as a person, so I hope that he can get himself right and make the most of his talent, because when it comes to footy ability, there's not many with as much as him. So hopefully he can be his best version at GWS.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, he gets another chance, but not all players get that. You just had to go through the delisting process and you've let some players go. How tough are those meetings to have and those decisions to make? Can anything prepare you for being the person who has to deliver that?
No, I'm lucky. I've got great support with Peter Bell, and we do that job together. But he probably hands down the bad news, and I'm there to support him and support the player. So I've got great support around the footy club to help me through those situations. But yeah, it is the hardest thing, because a lot of the guys that you are telling that they haven't got a job anymore have given all they can, and to tell them that there's not a spot for them or a job for them next year, how much that affects their whole life and how much that's gonna hurt their dreams. So it's not something I take lightly, it's not something I take lightly. And I think going forward as a footy club, we need to make sure that none of those decisions come as a shock to the player, that our communication with them throughout the year is really clear and open, so that it doesn't hit them with sledgehammer, that news. And we've got to make sure that we set them up off the field so that they've got something to go into if footy is not for them anymore. So, we'll continue to try and get better at that and try and make sure that we keep developing holistic people and players who have an identity outside of footy, so that when that situation comes, they're set up outside of footy so that their life can continue on.
Thankfully, the young players who are coming into the Dockers now are coming into a team that's on the rise, seemingly. That wasn't the case for you. You won 6 of your first 35 games as a player, Justin. When the Dockers were, the whipping boys of the competition. How detrimental was that to a young player's mindset as you're trying to embark on your AFL journey?
I didn't really see it as detrimental. I mean, we got given a lot of opportunities as well through that time. So, we were a young team that were growing together. We still went out there thinking we could win every game, and felt like we gave it our all in every game. I think 2001 was, we took us 18 games or 17 or 18 games to win our first game. So that was obviously a really difficult year. I don't know. I don't look back at that time thinking it was detrimental. I think it brought us closer together as a group. We had a core young group of players that were coming through together. It was definitely frustrating at times and unenjoyable at times. But I don't think it was detrimental to us at all. I think, I don't know. I don't know how to describe that. That's actually the first time I've heard that stat. So, it gets back to probably the point I made before about winning and playing well is the only time you can really enjoy it as a professional footballer, and it does take the fun away when you're getting beaten all the time. So I quite often, look back at some of those times, and some of those times have made me the coach I am now. So, look at all your experiences, and whether they're positive or negative, and take the experiences from them and allow you to grow and when those things come up again.
Yeah, Damien Drum was in charge then. So what do you learn from a coaching point of view from that period, going through the toughest of times? How does that sort of toughen you up for coaching an AFL team?
Yeah, well, I just think from the tough times I've learned over my time as a player and as a coach, I think being consistent as a coach through those times. Sometimes I think when you lose a couple of games in a row, you can flip the game plan on its head and start focusing on something totally different, which just throws a little bit more chaos or fuel on the fire, so to speak. I think consistency and clarity of consistency through tough times is really important for a leader, and something that I tried to stick to this year. When times were tough, like we'd lost 4 in a row, tried to be really consistent in the messaging, tried to make sure our players were really clear on what they needed to do, and a lot of that stuff I'd learnt from my tough times as a coach and tough times as a player.
You also lived one of the absolute dreams of any sporting person, and that is kicking an after the siren goal against St Kilda on that Friday night, of course. Can you take us through that moment? What's going through your mind after you've taken the mark, the siren goes, and you've got a kick to win your team the game? The little minute details that you might think of in that moment?
It's funny because I get asked that question a lot, what's going through your mind, and the only thing that was going through my mind was my routine. It really was. And I'd done a lot of work with our sports psych of coming up with a routine. I remember practicing the routine at training, and that moment happened, and all I could focus on was marking my spot as I walked back, lining that spot up with the middle of the goals. I remember consciously taking two or three steps further back from what I usually do so I could get a little bit more momentum up, and that I'd be far enough away from the man in the mark. And I remember consciously thinking at the top of my mark, lining up the spot I usually marked with the middle of the goals, and then thinking momentum. And it really was as clear as that. And I quite often tell school kids now, make sure you practice with purpose. And when I get asked that question about the goal after siren, make sure you practice with purpose, because I wouldn't have been able to execute that kick if I hadn't practiced with purpose and come up with a really clear routine that allowed me to execute in that moment. And I think that's what led to my emotions boiling over after I kicked that goal, was because I was so focused in that moment that it just spilled over. I probably hadn't planned on executing the jump into the crowd and what you do after you kick a goal like that. But I just remember really sticking to what I'd practiced. So that was a great lesson for me.
It was a great moment, and obviously the high points just about of your time at Freo, apart from playing finals, of course. So you've got such a deep connection with the club. Do you ever sit back and think how lucky you are to actually coach the club that you played for? It's not something that too many people have the privilege of doing.
Nearly every day, to be honest, Garby. Not only I get to coach a club that I'm really passionate about, I get to pay back a club that has given me a lot of opportunities. Firstly, my opportunity as a player, but gave my first opportunity as a coach, and then first opportunity as a senior coach. So, I feel like I owe the club a lot, and I've still got a lot to pay back the club for the opportunities they gave me. So, every day I think about those types of things.
I think that's the perfect place to to end this chat and say thank you. I think Dockers fans will have smiles on their faces, and sporting fans in general would have just really been engrossed in the learnings of someone who's at the top level of sport and has gone through such a unique pathway to get there. So Justin, thanks so much for joining me and for sharing so many of your experiences and your thoughts on life in such a unique job in sport with me.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Justin. All the best for the off season and for the upcoming season and for your journey with the Dockers. It's one that we watch with interest. Thanks so much.
Thank you.